I spent $225,000 to save my mother's life. That money could have bought a house in most states. It was equal to nearly 4 years of the average American salary. I drained my own business accounts to cover every treatment, every procedure, and every bill that insurance refused. I thought family would see the sacrifice. I thought love and loyalty would be stronger than convenience. 3 months after the cancer was gone, I was told to pack my things. I was not being punished for failure. I was being pushed aside for the golden child. The same house I had kept standing with my money now belonged to someone who had not lifted a hand. My mother smiled at her and asked me to move out so she could take my room. That was the thanks for carrying a financial burden heavier than most people will ever know. This is not a story about numbers on a bank statement. It is about the price of honor and what happens when sacrifice is invisible to the very people it saves. You can spend a fortune to hold a family together, but betrayal can break it apart in a single sentence. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon: stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive, advanced, and expensive. The treatment plan looked like a mortgage contract. Surgery alone would cost $45,000. Each chemotherapy cycle came in at $12,000, and there would be many. Radiation added another $28,000, and the medications were $3,200 every month. The financial weight was staggering. Even with insurance covering a portion, the gap was wide enough to crush any middle-class household. At the same time, the family had its regular bills. The mortgage stood at $2,100 each month. Utilities ran about $340, groceries averaged $1,000, and there were car payments, fuel, and prescriptions. My parents lived on a modest pension and Social Security income. They could not even cover the basics without strain, let alone hundreds of thousands in medical debt. My father looked defeated. My mother tried to smile through fear. They had no idea that I had already decided to carry it all. From the outside, I seemed fragile. I had returned home after a divorce, paying $800 in rent to help with expenses. To them, I was a child who had fallen back into the basement, wearing pajamas and staring at a laptop. What they did not see was the company I had built from that same basement. Fortune 500 clients wired in $35,000 every month. That was more than half the average American makes in a year. The average salary in the United States is $55,000 annually. I was making that in less than 2 months. I covered everything without a word. I wired payments directly to the oncology center. I sent checks for the mortgage. I paid the utility bills the day they arrived. Every invoice was handled before my parents even opened the envelope. My mother thought insurance had turned out to be better than expected. My father believed luck had softened the blow. I let them believe it. I wanted their only focus to be survival. While they saw me as a divorced daughter trying to rebuild a life, I was quietly spending $18,000 a month to keep our home and save my mother's life. The sacrifice was invisible by design. I carried the weight alone, and that was the way I wanted it. Not for recognition, not for praise, but because loyalty sometimes means bleeding in silence, so the people you love can breathe without fear. Sarah came back when the storm of her divorce became too heavy to carry. She arrived with 2 children, a U-Haul full of boxes, and a story about needing to start over. Within days, the house began to shift. My parents talked about converting the garage into a playroom so the kids would have space. My father suggested the basement could serve as Sarah's new office once she found a job. Every corner of the home was reshaped to make her comfortable. My contributions, the mortgage payments, and medical bills I had covered for years were never mentioned. Sarah found remote work as a customer service rep, bringing in $2,800 a month. It barely covered her car payment and child support obligations. Meanwhile, I had been carrying $18,000 a month in family expenses without missing a beat. The numbers spoke for themselves, but no one seemed to notice. My rent kept coming in at $800. The grocery bills climbed higher with the addition of 2 children, but no one suggested Sarah contribute. Instead, the laughter of her kids filled the rooms, and my parents acted as if the house had been reborn. The difference became clear at Christmas. The tree was stacked with gifts, each wrapped in glittering paper. My niece and nephews opened expensive toys bought by my father. Sarah unwrapped a velvet box containing diamond earrings worth $800. My mother beamed as she fastened them on her daughter's ears. When it was my turn, I opened a white envelope and found a $25 Target gift card. My mother hugged me and said I was self-sufficient and did not need much. I smiled politely, but inside, something shifted. It was not the card itself that stung. It was the meaning behind it. Years of silent sacrifice had been invisible, while Sarah's return was rewarded like a triumph. That Christmas morning marked the moment I understood that loyalty in this house was not measured by sacrifice. It was measured by who fit the story my parents wanted to tell. It started as a quiet conversation after dinner. My parents explained that Sarah needed stability, that her children were finally adjusting to school, and that moving again would be too hard. They looked at me as if the answer was obvious. My room, with its private bathroom and space across the hall from the kids, was perfect for her. They said I had been talking about getting my own place anyway. Their tone was gentle, but the decision had already been made. I listened without protest. I had carried the mortgage for 2 years, 18 months of cancer bills, and every utility in between. Yet in that moment, I was treated as the extra body, the one who could be shifted without consequence. The room I had worked 70-hour weeks from, the space where I had kept the household afloat, was being handed to someone who had never contributed a single dollar to keep it standing. The irony cut deeper than anger could. They gave me a deadline. By New Year's, Sarah would have her own room, and I would need to move on. It was spoken with kindness, but the meaning was ruthless. In the house I had kept alive, I was no longer needed. That night, I realized something simple but sharp. A house without fairness will always turn against the one who holds it up. It is not walls or payments that define belonging. It is recognition. And when that is gone, the house itself becomes a stranger. I began with the insurance company. One phone call ended the supplemental policy that had covered every monitoring appointment. The representative warned me that future visits would cost $1,200 each. I said I understood. Next came the oncology center. I told them all payments should now be billed directly to the patient. The voice on the other end hesitated but agreed. It was clinical, simple, and final. Then I called the bank. The automatic withdrawal of $2,100 for the mortgage was removed. I knew what would happen. Within 30 days, the account would show delinquency. Within 90 days, the first foreclosure notice would arrive. The utility company was next. I cleared my card from the account that averaged $340 a month. The system accepted the change without a word. The same with the car insurance. $480 monthly, gone with a few keystrokes. I moved through the list like a checklist. The housekeeping service is $280. The lawn company, $340. The grocery delivery service, the small expenses that had quietly made life comfortable. One by one, I cut the ties. Each call was short, and each confirmation was received. I did not explain myself. I did not argue. I simply ended what had been hidden. By the end of the week, the house stood on its own. At least that was how it seemed. In truth, the foundation had been removed. Bills began to stack. Past due notices appeared. What had once flowed smoothly now backed up like a clogged pipe. Within weeks, the lights flickered, the gas was cut, and foreclosure letters were taped to the door. The collapse was not sudden. It was steady, predictable, and precise. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clarity. For 2 years, the house had been an illusion of stability. My money had been the quiet spine holding it upright. Once I pulled my hands away, gravity did the rest. It was not revenge. It was simply the truth being revealed, bill by bill, notice by notice, until the reality no one wanted to see could no longer be ignored. The call came late in the evening. My mother's voice was thin, breaking under the weight of panic. She said the bank had sent foreclosure papers, and the utilities were about to be cut. 40 years in the same house, and it was slipping away in weeks. She begged me to help, to send something, to step in before it was too late. I listened in silence and let her words hang. Then I asked how she thought it had all been paid for before. The cancer treatment alone was $225,000. Insurance covered about 60%. Who did she believe covered the rest? There was no answer. I pressed again. The mortgage she thought had paid itself, the utility bills that never missed a cycle, the insurance premiums that allowed her appointments to feel manageable. Who had been carrying that weight? The silence on the other end was heavier than any words. I told her it had been me. For 2 years, I had poured $15,000 to $20,000 each month into the house. In total, $275,000. Every bill, every appointment, every service had come through my hands. She whispered that it was impossible, that she had never known. That was the point. They had never asked. They had never wondered how a household on $3,000 a month had survived a storm that destroyed most families. The illusion was easier than the truth. I did not raise my voice. I delivered it like a verdict. They had chosen not to see, and now they had to live with the collapse that followed. It was not cruelty, it was reality stripped bare. The silence that followed was longer than any argument. In that silence, the truth settled like a final judgment. The house did not survive the winter. Foreclosure went through, and my parents moved into a modest apartment that cost nearly all of their Social Security checks. Sarah packed up and returned to Portland, renting a small 2-bedroom place and finding a job that finally covered her own expenses. The house that had been rebuilt around her ended up belonging to none of us. I signed a lease on a loft downtown, a space filled with light and silence, and my business thrived without the weight of hidden bills. By the end of the year, I purchased my own home, not large but fully mine. A place built on clarity, not obligation. In one room sits an empty bed that rarely sees a guest. I keep it that way as a reminder of what belonging truly means. Even so, every month I set aside $2,000 in a separate account marked for emergencies. If my mother's cancer ever returns, I will be ready to pay again. That is not a weakness. That is a choice. Loyalty does not vanish even when trust is broken, but it is a loyalty shaped by limits and guided by honor. Money can buy treatments, cover mortgages, and keep the lights on, but it cannot hold a house together. Only fairness, loyalty, and respect can do that. Without them, a home is just walls waiting to crumble. With them, even the smallest place can stand as strong as stone. Life often forces us to choose between loyalty and honor. Sometimes those choices come quietly, disguised as family requests or sacrifices no one else notices. Other times, they arrive as a moment of betrayal that leaves us standing alone. The question is not just what you give, but what you are willing to lose if respect is not part of the exchange. I want you to think about the times you have been overlooked or replaced, even after giving more than anyone realized. Did you stay silent, or did you stand firm in your dignity? Share your story in the comments. Your words might give someone else the strength to make their own choice with clarity and honor.